It's Captain's Day at the Four Nations Face-Off. We're going to find out who'll be wearing the C's for Canada, the U.S., Finland, and Sweden. Darren, we're chatting just after noon Eastern Time. Team USA is going to announce its captain in less than an hour. Who's it going to be?
Auston Matthews of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I don't think that there should be a lot of surprise or shock in any of that. With all due respect to all of the countries participating, the four teams in the Four Nations Face-Off, I mean, all four of these teams loaded with high-level leadership. You know, I think of Matthew Tkachuk and what he went through to lead the Florida Panthers to the Stanley Cup Championship, his level of experience throughout Team USA. You look at Team Canada, all of that. But this is credit where credit is due. And I think from a Leafs perspective, they have to feel pretty good. It just speaks to Auston Matthews' good health and his want to represent his country. But he also takes a responsibility of being captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs deeply to heart as well. He knows physically what's at stake here. So this bodes well for the here and now and also for the future, because Matthews is going to try and lead Team USA to a Four Nations championship. And then he's going to come back ready to fly for the late push of the regular season and hopefully lead the Toronto Maple Leafs deep into the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Auston Matthews, captain of Team USA. Now, in another Leaf-related story, we know that the Toronto Maple Leafs are looking to add up front. Big Brandon Saad has been waived by the Blues.
Yeah.
What's the interest level from the Leafs in Saad?
Well, it's at least moderate, and I say that because I don't want to say high or I don't want to say limited. High speaks to the level that, okay, he's a primary target, and that might ultimately end up being what it is, depending on what Brandon Saad gets on the open market when he clears waivers on Friday. The reason I choose the word moderate is because as much as I like the history between Craig Berube and Brandon Saad and the fact that Saad could complement what the Toronto Maple Leafs have because he can skate, he can provide secondary scoring, he hasn't been providing much with the St. Louis Blues to this point of the year, which is why he's gone through this process. And, you know, again, I caution Toronto has other needs. You know, we watched the game that the Leafs played against the Minnesota Wild. Yes, we know John Tavares is coming back. He should be back after the weekend, but they're suspect up the middle. So Brad Treliving is looking at the center market and perhaps some help on the blue line. So can they afford to bring in Brandon Saad if that money invested, cap space invested, maybe comes at the expense of something more needy, like a centerman or a defenseman? And those are questions that are probably being asked internally in Toronto and will swirl around any sort of negotiation specific to Brandon Saad and his agent.
All right, to Edmonton, where we know they had need on the blue line. They signed John Klingberg about 2 weeks ago. He's been skating with them ever since. Hasn't played a game in the NHL since November 2023. What's his timeline? When do you expect him to debut with the Oil?
Well, I reported on Wednesday, Gino, that I expected he'd make his debut on Saturday against the Maple Leafs. And then I received word that, no, we're going to push this up a little bit. And he could be in the lineup as early as tonight, being Thursday. So that's my expectation as we do this segment. And this is a really good story that could develop, Gino, into a great story, obviously, for John Klingberg. There was no risk here for general manager Stan Bowman. And Klingberg chose the Edmonton Oilers because of opportunity. Opportunity on their blue line. We're going to find out what he is. We know he's a power play specialist. He'll start in their third pairing. Could he creep into a top four spot? Well, sure, if he plays well. And if he plays well, maybe that moves into a longer-term relationship with Edmonton or a better position when he goes into free agency this summer. But to this point, he's a good story because of all the work that he's had to invest to get to this stage, not that far removed from a serious surgery in that hip resurfacing procedure. So we're all going to keep a close eye on John Klingberg, not just because of the debut night, but to see how he develops moving forward.
If this goes, Dregs, from a good story to a great story, and Klingberg is really better than anticipated, what, if anything, does this do for the negotiations between the Oilers and Evan Bouchard, who's set to become a restricted free agent at the end of the season?
Well, look, you know this. I mean, negotiations are always about leverage. One side thinks they have it. The other side thinks they have it. Now, he is a restricted free agent, Evan Bouchard, that is. So I'm sure that he doesn't think that, the success story of John Klingberg and what that might develop into is going to influence that process in any way, shape, or form. Well, it might, only from a financial perspective, right? I mean, they've got Darnell Nurse on a big ticket. Can they really afford to keep Evan Bouchard on an equally large or maybe even a bigger contract? Well, they may not have a choice. Now, the flip side to that is, okay, well, how do you fill the hole of Evan Bouchard if you create a hole? And that's where you get into the John Klingberg conversation. Look, nobody expects that he's going to overtake, the ice time of Evan Bouchard or any of that. But as we go into this process, I think it's a fair conversation to have as to how it might influence. And, maybe best case scenario in all of this is, again, Bouchard earns a longer term or a longer stay in Edmonton based on his play. So there's a few different ways we can consider this.
Dregs, you've had a busy morning and your day's not done yet. The full version of Insider Trading with Dregs, CJ, and PR is coming up on the early edition of SportsCenter.